Hey guys, welcome back. It's Missy, and today I'm coming through with another important video. Today we're going to be talking about boundaries, and not just boundaries, but how to enforce boundaries. Because setting boundaries, it could be the easier part, thinking about how you want to say no, or thinking about what you want and you don't want, but it's much harder to actually go through with them and enforce them. So today we're going to go into what boundaries are, why we set boundaries, and how to set them and then enforce them. So going to the basics, what is a boundary? A boundary is just basically fences we keep up to protect ourselves, to teach people how we want to be treated, so the things we want and we don't want. So there are many different types of boundaries, but I like to simplify into 3 categories. So that's mental, physical, and emotional. Mental boundaries are basically boundaries we set around our ideas, our opinions, and our thoughts. So these boundaries are set to teach people to be respectful towards you and your intellect. So pretty much not allowing people to belittle you or put you down for the things you have to say. Then there's emotional boundaries, and these are revolved around your feelings and the energy you give to others and the emotional energy they give to you as well. So these types of boundaries help you if someone's being a little too negative. You could put a boundary up that maybe you don't talk to them too often, or also a boundary with the things that you share about yourself, your feelings. You can put boundaries up around what you express and to who you're expressing. Then there's physical, so it's your space, your body, your things that you own that are yours. So like setting boundaries around, like maybe you don't want people to touch certain things, maybe you don't want to be hugged or touched a certain way. Healthy boundaries is something that we're not taught a lot of the times. Especially in toxic homes, you're taught that you're not allowed to have boundaries, or even in normal homes, a lot of the times parents, they'll have anxiety about you being a good kid, or also they'll have anxiety about how they look as a parent. So a lot of times they'll be like, hey, listen, you need to share, or they'll say like, oh, you need to go play with that kid, but they never really teach you to check in with yourself to see if that's something you want or you don't want. They don't allow you to say yes or no and grow as a person. Of course there is important to teach sharing and including other children. It's important to have that balance, but it's also important to learn how to say no and learn about what you want and don't want. And it's something we don't ask our children enough. We forget that they're little humans with their own feelings and their own opinions. We can teach children the importance of sharing and thinking of others, as well as we can teach children to check in with themselves and see how they feel about things. So boundaries are really hard for the people pleasers. The fears of what other people are thinking, fear of hurting other people's feelings. You want other people's approval, so you will please them, or you're afraid of their response, so you won't even express what's going on with you. Then there are the givers, and those are the people that more so givers are people that were in toxic homes, or they were people they grew up with parents that were overly giving. Those are the codependents. And people pleasers also codependent, but when you're a giver, you may give till you are drained, until you're burnt out and you are self-sacrificing. So that's exactly what happens, is you will people please, you will give, you will fix to the point where you are mentally and physically exhausted. You are burnt out. And that's when resentment comes into play. So you get stuck in the cycle where you're addicted to giving, to helping, to people pleasing, and then eventually you will feel angry and resentful towards that person because you are not getting the same thing in return. Most people, they're not giving the same thing that you're giving. So then you will get stuck in that cycle of giving, burnt out, resentful. And it all revolves around not having healthy boundaries. Also, sorry, my voice is going in and out, so hopefully I don't lose it, but bear with me. So like I said, we teach people how to treat us. So what happens is we're doing all these things, we are teaching people that it's okay to overly ask us for things, it's okay to take advantage of us, and then we get upset. That's something that happened with me, is I would overly give and I would start to feel resentful because I wasn't getting the same thing in return. And also I was like, well, how could they ask that of me? That's a little bit unfair, that's unrealistic. And it's because I set up that expectation. I had to understand that. So now that we understand a little bit more about boundaries and why we were not able to enforce them in the past, let's talk about how do we now have boundaries and enforce them. So the first thing I always talk about this is self check-ins. It's always important, check in with yourself. especially when someone's asking something of you, before immediately responding, because a lot of times like we'll get that anxiety that we need to immediately respond. Take a minute and ask yourself, like, okay, does this benefit me or does this hurt me? Is this something I genuinely want to do, or is this something that would hurt me? A lot of the times we immediately just say yes because we have that pressure. And so it's hard to take a step back, especially if someone's pushing us and trying to push for that answer. Something you could always do is you could let them know, like, listen, if you need me to immediately respond, then ask someone else, because I don't think that I can give you an answer right now. And they may accept it, they may not, it doesn't matter. That has nothing to do with you. It's important you let them know where you stand, like if you are unsure, and that's okay for you to be unsure. So it's important to check in with yourself and see, like, okay, is this something I want? How am I feeling? Check your temperature. Always check your temperature to see, because when we don't, that's why we wind up in those situations where we're doing something like, oh, I don't want to do this, or you start being resentful, you start being passive aggressive. So check in with yourself first if you genuinely want to, or you don't want to, or if it hurts you in some sort of way. The next thing is determine what you want and what you don't want. This is where self-love really comes into play. This is when you really identify who you are, what you value, and your own needs. This is the time to learn what bothers you, so that way you can learn how to communicate when things bother you. It's always important to make yourself number one priority, because without you, other people don't matter. If you're literally struggling to live, you can't help other people. That's why they say put your mask on first, and then you can go put the mask on someone else. You're not your best self when you're not taking care of yourself. So if you are someone where you enjoy helping people, that's great. At the same time, it can't be your own identity, your only identity. You need to really love yourself and determine what do you want and what do you not want. So maybe a boundary you set is that after 9 p.m., that's your bedtime. No one can talk to you. And that's cool. You can have that boundary. You need to set that boundary and let people know this is what they can expect of you. You're not available after 9 p.m. If you're mentally exhausted and maybe had a little bit of rough of a day, and your friend calls you and they said they want to vent, that's a time to check in with yourself and realize, like, I'm not really doing too good today. That's the energy I can't really give. And that's a time when you absolutely can say no. Maybe there's a situation where your friend is constantly calling you up and asking you for rides, and you're really struggling with gas money and they're not offering. Boundary could set is either you let them know, listen, I need some gas money, or no, I'm sorry, I can't give you rides anymore. You really need to determine how you want to be treated and really recognize the things that you don't like and what are you going to do about it, because you can do something about it. What are you going to do? The other thing to keep in mind is when you're teaching people how to treat you, it's not just important that you tell them no what you don't like. It's important to also correct the behavior. So for instance, let's say you meet up to lunch with someone and they're constantly late. So rather than just saying like, hey, I really don't like it when you're late, say, hey, I don't like it when you're late. I'd really appreciate if in the future you could show up 5 minutes earlier, or you could try to show up on time, whatever it is. Like, let them know how you want to be treated in the future, because if you don't give people direction, they may stop doing what they're doing, but then they have no idea what you expect from them. So you need to let them know what you expect from them. The next thing when it comes to boundaries is understand people will always accept no and be happy about it, and it's okay, because other people's feelings are not your responsibility. When you are first setting boundaries, especially when you're first setting boundaries, people are going to try to challenge you and push you, because that's what they're used to. They're used to you just saying yes and doing what they want, so they'll push you at first. And this comes to like toxic people, they'll overly push you and disrespect your boundaries. And then it's just normal people, they may push you because they're not used to hearing no. That's just that maybe how they grow up, or they're just, like I said, that for so long you didn't say no, so they're like, that's weird. Maybe if I try a little bit more, they'll change their mind. That's something that happened with me growing up in the home I grew up in. No was very confusing, because sometimes no meant yes and sometimes no meant no. Sometimes it meant try harder, try again, because sometimes when they said no, all of a sudden it was happening. So this is something I learned in like my older teens, a little bit early 20s. I had a boyfriend where one time there was this time where I was like, do you want to eat? And he was like, no. And I was like, okay, you sure you don't want to eat? You want to eat? You want to eat, right? And I kept pushing it. And he was like, I said no. Why don't you respect my no? And I was like, oh my God. At first I was like, no, that's not what's going on. Of course I gotta do that. But then I thought about it and I self-reflected and I was like, oh shoot, like he's right. I don't respect no sometimes. And it was because I didn't understand what no meant before. And it's not because I was narcissistic. Well, I hope I'm not. I don't think I am. But it's because I was so used to no meaning yes sometimes, and it was very confusing. So I had to learn when someone says no, they mean no, and I have to respect that. So that's something that other people, same thing, like they have to learn no means no, and it's okay. So again, you need to learn how to be consistent. Don't get angry that they're not respecting your no. Just understand, like, they're not used to it, and that's when you have to reinforce and say no. And let them know you're not the one. You're not the one to keep pushing. No means no. And also over time, this will show who's for you and who's not really for you. Who are the toxic people in your life that are not respectful towards you, and who are the people that are chilling. Like, you know what, I respect and I love this person. I'm gonna respect their boundaries. Most of the time, when you have those healthy people in your life, they'll respect no. It's okay. No's okay. And you are the one who usually has a lot more anxiety about saying no than other people. A lot of times people, they'll accept no and they'll move on with their life. And the other people, you're tough, you're strong, you'll reinforce it over and over and let them know you're not the one. But again, remember, other people's feelings are not your responsibility. You have to remind yourself over and over again. Allow people to be upset if they're gonna be upset. You don't have to immediately fix it. Also, that comes to overly helping sometimes. You may have even done this where someone would be like, no, I'm good, but you'll keep trying to push to help. That's something that I would do, is I would try to push help sometimes a little bit too much, because I didn't want other people to experience pain. It hurt me so much to think about other people experiencing pain, so I would push. That way I would take on other people's problems. But then I learned that was messed up, because now other people weren't learning the lessons they need to learn in life. So then I was like, you know what, people have to feel their pain. I have to take a step back. It's not all about me. Like, I can't take on everyone else's problems. I made myself more important than I was. And that can happen sometimes. So if you are someone that you're overly helpful, overly giving, just know sometimes they gotta take on their own problems. They gotta learn this lesson, and that's okay. You can be on the sidelines, but you can't be the front runner. Which goes a little bit into my next point. Don't overly explain yourself. A lot of times we overly explain ourselves because we're feeling our own guilt. We're trying to convince that person that what we're saying is valid. Like, believe me. Like, it's basically like a beg to please believe me. I'm defending myself. It's the way that we're doing with our own anxiety, like I said, our own guilt. But here's the thing. When you overly explain yourself, that is just a way for like unhealthy, toxic people to use it as a way to counteract what you're saying. So if you explain yourself, you're like, I can't, like my kids are sleeping, then they'll be like, well, have them nap, before you come help me out. Or they'll try to fix your problem for you when you want them to accept no. So don't try to overly explain yourself, because it's never helpful. You're allowed to say no, and that's it. You don't have to give an explanation. There are times when you give an explanation, like there are certain people, you need to be aware of the people that you're saying no to. So if you know there's a little bit more of a more toxic person, then of course you just say, no, I'm sorry, I would love to, but I'm sorry, I can't. And then there's other people who you feel comfortable with, like, no, I'm sorry, I can't, I got this going on. And they're like, okay, cool. All right, I'll ask someone else. Or, okay, cool, next time. So just be really aware of who you're explaining yourself to, and also check in with yourself, like, why are you overly explaining yourself? Are you feeling guilt? Are you trying to get this person's approval of why it's okay for you to say no? Like, you don't need another person's approval of why you say no. Like, you could say no because you don't feel like it, and that's a good enough reason. And then the last thing, the most important, is to enforce them. After you determine how you want to be treated, after you understand, other people, they may accept it, they may not, and that's okay. That's not your problem. When you do those self-check-ins, you really need to enforce them. Like I said, people will try to push you. They'll push you as much as they can, because people like to get their way. They're going to try, some people try to convince you. People always try to get their way and try to see a way that they could persuade you. There are some people that like that, and so other people are just chill. But understand there are people out there that are like that. So when people try to push you, you need to push right back. People always thinking about themselves and thinking about how do they get what they want. So you have to understand, people are not going to read your mind. They're not going to know what you want. They're not going to know that something's bothering you. You have to communicate that to them. You have to be assertive. You have to let people know, like, listen, no, that's not okay. I'm not cool with that. Or no, I don't want to. No, I can't. And the most important thing when it comes to enforcing is you have to be consistent. You can't just say no and then change your mind immediately after. You can't say, like, I go to bed at 9 p.m. and then change your mind every couple times. Like, that teaches people that you don't mean it. That teaches people to disrespect you. Like, you have to be consistent. Can you change your mind? Yeah, absolutely. Can things change up? Yeah, absolutely. It's not like you have to be like a control freak about it, but just understand, like, when you backtrack, same thing with a child, when you tell a child no and then you give in to them anyways, that's teaching them to disrespect you. Same thing with people. You're teaching them to disrespect you. That's how you're teaching you want to be treated. So you need to teach them otherwise that this is, I mean what I say. It's important you mean what you say and you follow through consistently with what you're saying. Now, something to understand is sometimes people will be a perfectionist about boundaries. You don't have to be a perfectionist. You do want to follow through, but it's important to have that balance. You need to learn when to give and when to not give, when to think about yourself. If you want to help, that's great. Like I said, it's awesome that you want to help, that you're a healer, you're a helper, you're a giver, that's great. At the same time, there needs to be that balance. So that's where those self-check-ins come into play, where you're like, I'm not feeling it, I'm not feeling good, my mental health is bad, my physical health, whatever it is. If you're not doing well, then the answer is always no. And you can help them another time, and that's okay. But there needs to be that balance. Because if you're having a hard time with boundaries, you're giving too much and it's a problem. So when it comes to boundaries, you need to do self-check-ins. You always check in with yourself. You need to determine what you want and what you don't want. How do you want to be treated? You have to understand sometimes people won't accept no, and that's not your problem. Sometimes they will, and that's cool. But sometimes they won't, and it's okay. Understand, like, you don't have to explain yourself. So you don't always have to over-explain yourself. If you want to, you can. If you don't have to. And then last, you need to enforce it. And like I said, you need to have that balance of deciding when do you want to help, when do you not want to help. So what do you guys think? Leave it in the comments below. And please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And share with somebody you think may need it. Until next time, thanks for watching. Bye, guys. This is how I do my nails. You just quickly put one coat. So that way no one, and that way no one touches me. That way no one gets offended by my nails. That is atrocious, but to teach people the things we want and what we do want. So like am I gonna lose my voice?